Hello everyone. So let's move forward. Karma Yoga Chapter 2. Chapter name is Each is Great in His Own Place. So according to the Sankhya philosophy, nature is composed of three forces called in Sanskrit Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. There, these as manifested in physical world are what we may call equilibrium, activity and inertness. Tamas is typified as darkness or inactivity. Rajas is activity expressed as attraction or repulsion, and Sattva is the equilibrium of two. In every man there are these three forces. Sometimes tamas prevails, we become lazy, we cannot move, we are inactive, bound down by certain ideas or by mere dullness. At other times activity prevails and at still other times that calm balancing of both. Again in different men one of these forces is generally predominant. The characteristics of one man is inactivity, dullness and laziness, that of another activity, power, manifestation of energy, and in still another we find the sweetness, calmness and gentleness which are due to the balancing of both action and inaction. So, in all creation, in animals, plant, and man, we find that more or less typical manifestation of all these different forces. So, Karma Yoga has especially to deal with these three factors. By teaching what they are and how to employ them, it helps us to do our work better. Human society is graded organization. We all know about morality and we all know about duty, but at the same time, we find that in different countries the significance of the moralities vary greatly. Yeah, we will see it in example. What is regarded as moral in one country may in another be considered perfectly immoral. For instance, in one country, cousin may marry, in other it is thought to be very immoral. Like we have seen in our neighbor country or in another religion that's another religion. But so now come to the topic what is regarded as moral in one country may be in another to be considered perfectly immoral. For instance, in one country, cousin may marry in other. It is the very immoral. In one man may marry their sisters-in-law. In another, it is regarded as very immoral. In one country, people may marry only once, in another many times, and so forth. Similarly, in all other departments of morality, we find the standard vary greatly, yet we have the idea that must be a universal standard of morality. So, is it with duty? The idea of duty varies much among different nations. In one country, if a man does not do certain things, people will say he has acted wrongly. If he does those very things in another country, the people will say that he did not act rightly, and yet we know that there must be some universal idea of duty. In the same way, one class of the society thinks that the certain things are among its duty, while another class thinks quite the opposite and would be horrified if it had to do those things. Two ways are left open to us: the way of the ignorant and who think that there is only one way to truth and that all the rest are wrong, and the way of the wise who admit that according to the mental constitution or the different planes of existence in which we are, duty and morality war. The important thing is to know that there are gradation of duty and of morality, that the duty of one state of life in the set of circumstances will not and cannot be that of another. To illustrate, all great teachers have taught resist not evil, that not resistance is the highest moral value. Non-resistance non-resistance is the highest moral ideal. We all know that if a certain number of us attempted to put that maxim full into practice, the whole social fabric would be fall to the pieces. The wicked would take possession of our properties and our lives and would do whatever they like us with. Even if only one day of such non-resistance were practiced, it would lead to a disaster. Yet, intuitively, in our heart of hearts, we feel the truth of teachings. Resist not evil. This seems to us to be the highest ideal. Yet to teach this doctrine only would be equivalent to condemning a vast portion of mankind. Not only so, it would be making men feel that they were always they were always doing wrong and cause in them scruples of conscience in all their actions. It would be taken weaken and that constant self-disapproval would be bred more wise and any other weakness would. To the man who has begun to hate himself of the gate to degeneration has already opened, and the same is true of a nation. Our first duty is not to hate ourselves, because to advance we must have faith in ourselves first and then in God. He who has no faith in himself can never faith in God. Therefore, the only alternative remaining to us is to recognize that duty and morality vary under different circumstances. Not that the man who resists evil is doing what is always and in itself wrong, but in that the different circumstances in which he is placed in it may become even his duty to resist evil. In reading the Bhagavad Gita, many of you in Western countries may have felt astonished at the second chapter, wherein Sri Krishna called Arjuna a hypocrite and a coward because of his refusal to fight or offer resistance on account of his adversaries being his friends and relatives, making the plea that non-resistance was the highest ideal of love. This is a great lesson for us all to learn that in all matter the two extremes are like the extremes positive and the extreme negative are always similar. When the vibration of lights are too slow, we do not see them, nor do we see them when they are too rapid. So with sound, when very low in pitch, we do not hear it. When very high, we do not hear it either. Of like nature is the difference between the resistance and non-resistance. One man does not resist because he is weak, lazy, and cannot, and not because he will not. The other man knows that he can strike an irresistible blow if he likes. Yet he not only does not strike but blesses his enemies. The one who from weakness resists not commit a sin, and as such cannot receive any benefits from the non-resistance, while the other would commit a sin by offering resistance. Buddha gave up his throne and renounced his position. That was true renunciation, but there cannot be any questions of renunciation in case of a beggar who has nothing to renounce. So we must always be careful about what we really mean when we speak of this non-resistance and ideal love. We must first take care to understand whether we have the power of resistance or not. Then, having the power, if we renounce it and do not resist, we are doing a grand act of love. But if we cannot resist and yet at the same time try to deceive ourselves into the believe that we are actuated by motives of the highest love. We are doing the exact opposite. Arjuna became a coward at the sight of the mighty array against him. His love make him forget his duty towards his country and king. That is why Sri Krishna told him that he was a hypocrite. Thou talkest like a wise man, but they thy but thy action betrayed thee to be a coward. Therefore stand up and fight. Such is the central idea of Karma Yoga. The Karma Yogi is the man who understands that the highest ideal is non-resistance and who always knows that this non-resistance is the highest manifestation of power in actual possession. And also what is called the resisting of evil is but a step on the way towards the manifestation of its highest power, namely non-resistance. Before reaching this highest ideal, man's duty is to resist evil. Let him work, let him fight, let him strike straight from the shoulder. Then only when he has gained the power to resist will not resist be a virtue. I once met a man in my country whom I had known before as a very stupid, dull person who knew nothing and had not desire to know anything and was living the life of a brute. He asked me what he should do to know God. Now he was to get free. Can you can you tell a lie? I asked him. No, he replied. Then you must learn to do so. It is better to tell a lie than to be a brute or a log of wood. You are inactive. You have not certainly reached at the highest state, which is beyond all actions, calm and serene. You are too dull to even do something wicked. That was an extreme case. Of course, and I was joking with him, but what I meant was that a man must be active in order to pass through activity to perform calmness. Inactivity should be avoided by all means. Activity always means resistance, resist all evils, mental and physicals. And when you have succeeded in resisting, then will calmness come. It is very easy to say, hate nobody, resist no evil, but what we know what that kind of things generally means in practice. When the eyes of societies are turned towards us, we may make a show of non-resistance, but in our hearts, it is canker all the times. We feel the utter wants of the calm of non-resistance. We feel that it would be the better for us to resist. If you desire wealth and know at the same time that the whole world regards him who aims to wealth as a very weak man, you perhaps will not dare to plunge into the struggle for wealth. Yet your mind will be running day and night after money. This is the hypocrisy and will serve no purpose. Plunge into the world, and then after a time when you have suffered and enjoy all that is in it, will renunciation come, then will calmness come. So fulfill your desire for power and everything else, and after you have fulfilled the desire, will come the time when you will know that they are all very little things, but until you have fulfilled this desire, until you have passed through that activity, it is impossible for you to come to the state of calmness, serenity and self-surrender. These ideas of serenity and renunciation have been preached for thousands of years. Everybody has heard of them from childhood, and yet we see very few in the world who have really reached at that stage. I do not know if I have seen 20% in my life who are really calm and non-resisting, and I have traveled over half of the world. Every man should take up his own ideal and endeavor to accomplish it. That is the surer way of progress that than talking up together man's ideals which he can never hope to accomplish. For example, we take a child at once give him the ask of walking 20 miles. Either the little ones dies or one in thousand crawl the 20 miles to reach at the end exhausted and half dead. That is like what we generally try to do with the world. All the men and the women in any societies are not of the same kind capacity or of same power to do same thing. They must have different ideals, and we have no rights to sneer at any ideals. Let everyone to do best he can for realizing his own ideal, nor is it right that I should be judged by your standard of you by mine. The apple tree should not be judged by the standard of oak, nor oak by the that of the apple. To to judge the apple tree, you must take the apple standard, and for the oak, its own standard. Unity in variety is the plan of creation. However, men and women may vary individually. There is unity in the background. The different individuals, characters, and classes of men and women are natural variation in creation. Hence, we ought not to judge them by the same standard or put the same ideal before them. Such a course creates only an unnatural struggle, and the result is that man begins to hate himself and is hindered from becoming religious and good. Our duty is to encourage everyone in his struggle to live up to his own highest ideal and strive at the all same times to make the ideal as near as possible to the truth. In the Hindu systems of morality, we find that this fact has been recognized from very ancient times, and in their scriptures and the books on ethics, different rules are laid down for the different classes of men: the householder, the sannyasi, the man who has renounced the world, and the student. The life of every individual, according to the Hindu scriptures, has its peculiar duties apart from what belongs in common to universal humanity. The Hindu begins life as a student, then he married and becomes a householder. In the old age he retires, and lastly gives up the world and becomes sannyasi. To each of these stages of life certain duties are attached. No one of these stages is intrinsically superior to another. The life of the married man is quite as great as that of the celibate who has devoted to himself to religious work. The scavenger in the street is quite as great and glorious as the king on his throne. Take him off his throne, make him to do the work of a scavenger, and see how he fares. Take up the scavenger and see how he will rule. It is the useless to say that a man who lives out of the world is a greater man than he who lives in the world. It is much more different to live in the world and worship God than to give it up. And a free and easy life. The four stages of life in India have in later in later times been reduced to two, that of the householders and of the monk. The householder marries and carries on his duties as a citizen, and the duty of the other is devoted his energies wholly to the religion, to preach and to worship God. I shall read to you a few passages from the Mahanirvana Tantra, which treats of the subject, and you will see that it is very difficult task for a man to be householder and perform all his duties perfectly. The householder should be devoted to God. The knowledge of God should be in his goal of life, yet he must work constantly, perform all his duties. He must give up the fruit of his actions to God. It is the most difficult things in the world to work and not care for the result. to help a man and never think that he ought to be grateful to do some good works at the same time never look to see whether it brings you name or fame or nothing at all. Even the most errant coward becomes brave, and when the world praises him, a fool can do heroic deeds when the approbation of the society is upon him. But for a man to constantly do good without caring for the approbation of his fellow man is indeed the highest sacrifice man can perform. The great duty of the stakeholder is to earn a living, but he must take care of that he does not do it by telling lies or by cheating or by robbing others, and he must remember that his life is for the service of God and the poor. Knowing that the mother and fathers are the visible representatives of God, the householders always and by all means must please them. If the mother is pleased and the father, the God is pleased with the man. That child is really a good child who never speak harsh word to his parents. Before parents, one must not utter jokes, must not show restlessness, must not show anger to, or temper. Before mother or father, a child must bow down low and stand up in their presence and must not take a seat until they ordered him to sit. If the householder has food and drink and clothes without first seeing that his mother and his father, his children, his wife, and the poor are supplied, he is committing a sin. The mother and the father are the causes of this body. So a man must undergo 1,000 troubles in order to do good to them. Even so is his duty to a wife. No man should scold his wife, and he must always maintain her as if she were his own mother. And even when he is in the greatest difficulties and troubles, he must not show anger to his wife. He who thinks of another woman besides his wife, if he touches her even with his mind, that man goes to dark hell. Before women he must not talk improper language or never brag of his powers. He must not say I have done this and I have done that. The householder must always please his wife with money, clothes, love, faith, words like nectar and never do anything to disturb her. That man who succeeded in getting the love of a chaste wife has succeeded in his religion and has all the virtues. The following are the duties towards children. A son should be lovingly reared up of his fourth year. He should be educated till he is 16. When he is 20 years old of age, he should be employed in some work. He should then treated affectionately by his fathers as equal. Exactly in the same manner, the daughter should be brought up and should be educated with the greatest care, and when she marries, the father ought to give her jewels and wealth. Then the duty of the man is towards his brothers and sisters and towards the children of his brothers and sisters if they are poor, and towards his other relatives, his friends and his servants. Then his duties are towards the people of the same village and the poor, and any of that comes to him for help. Having sufficient means, if the householder does not take care to give his relatives and to the poor, know him to be not only a brute, he his is not a human being. Excessive attachment to food, clothes, and the tending of the bodies and dressing of the hair should be avoided. The householder must be pure in heart and clean in body, always active and always ready for work. To his enemies, the householder must be a zero. Them he must resist. That is the duty of the householder. He must not sit down in the corner and weep and talk nonsense about the non-resistance. If he does not show himself as a hero to his enemy, he has not done his duty. And to his friends and relatives, he must be as gentle as a lamb. It is the duty of the householder not to pay reverence to the wicked. Because of his reverences, the wicked people of the world, he patronizes wickedness, and it will be a great mistake if he disregards those who are worthy of respect. The good people, he must not gushing in his friendship. He must not go out of the way making friends everywhere. He must watch the action of the man he wants to make friends with, and they are dealing with the other man, reason upon them, and then make friends. These three things he must not talk of. He must not talk in public of his own fame. He must not preach his own name or his own powers. He must not talk of his wealth or of any kind of that has been told him privately. A man must not say he is poor or he is wealthy. He must not brag of his wealth. Let him keep his own counsel. This is this is his religious duty. This is not mere worldly wisdom. If a man does not do so, he may be held to be immoral. The householder is the basis, the proper and the prop of the whole society. He is the principal earner. The poor, the weak, the children, and the women who do not work all live upon the householder. So there must be a certain duties that has to perform, and this duty must make him feel strong to perform them, and not to make him think that he is doing things beneath his ideal. Therefore, if he was done something big or has made some mistake, he must not say so in public. So if he is engaged in some enterprises and knows that he is sure to fail in it, he must not speak of it. Such self-exposure is not only uncalled for, but all unnerves the man and makes him unfit for the performance of his legitimate duties in life. At the same time, he must struggle hard to acquire these things. Firstly, knowledge, and secondly, wealth. It is the duty, and if he does not do his duty, he is nobody. A householder who does not struggle to get wealth is immoral. If he is lazy and content to lead an idle life, he is immoral because upon him depends hundreds. If he gets riches, hundreds of others will be thereby supported. If there were there were not in this country, not in this city, hundreds who had striven to become rich and who had acquired wealth, where would all these civilization and these almshouses and great houses be? Going after wealth is in such a case is not bad because that wealth is for distribution. The householder is the center of the life and society. It is a worship for him to acquire and spend wealth nobly. For the householder who struggle to become rich by good means and for good purpose is doing practically the same thing for the attainment of salvation as the anchorite does in his cell, and when he is praying, for in them we see only the different aspect of the same virtue of the self-surrender and self-sacrifices prompted by the feeling of devotion to God and to do all that is his. He must struggle to acquire a good name by all means. He must not gamble. He must not move in the company of wicked. He must not tell lies. He must not be the cause of the trouble to others. Often people enter often people enter into things they have not the means to accomplish, with the result that they cheat others to attain their own ends. Then there is in all things the time factors to be taken into consideration. What at one time might be a failure would perhaps at the another time very great success. The householder must speak the truth and speak gently, using the words which people like, people which will do good or good to others, not should he talk of the business of the other man. The householder by digging tanks, by planting trees on the roadsides, by establishing rest houses for men and animals, by making roads and building bridges, goes toward the same goal as the greatest yogi. This is one part of the tectonian of karma yoga activities. The duty of a householder. There is a passage later on where it says that if the householder dies in a battle fighting for his country or his religion, he comes to the same goal as the yogi by meditation, showing thereby that what is duty for one is not duty for another. At the same time, it does not say that this duty is lowering and other elevating. Each duty has its own place and according to the circumstances in which we are placed must be perform our duties. One idea come out of all this, the condemnation of all weaknesses. This is a particular idea in all our teaching which I like either in philosophy or in religion or in work. If you read the Vedas, you will find this word and always repeated fearlessness. Fear nothing. Fear is a sign of weakness. A man must go about his duty without taking notice of the sneers and ridicule of the world. If a man retires from the world to worship God, he must not think that those who live in the world or work for the good of the world are not worshipping God. Neither must those who live in the world for wife and children think that those who give up the world are low vagabonds. Each is great in his own place. This thought I will illustrate by an example of a story. A certain king used to inquire of all the sannyasis that came to his country, which is the greater man, he who give up the world and become a sannyasi, or he who lives in the world and perform his duties as a householder. Many wise men sought to solve the problem. Some asserted that the sannyasi was the greater, upon which the king demanded that they should prove their assertion. When they could not, he ordered them to marry and become householders. Then others came and said, the householder who performs his duty is the greater man of them too. The king demanded proofs. When they could not keep them, he made them also settle down as householders. At last there came a young sannyasi, and the king similarly inquired of him also. He answered, each, O king, is equally great in is equally, O king, each is equally great in his own place. Prove this to me, asked the king. I will prove it to you, said the sannyasi, but you must first come and live as I do for a few days, that I may be able to prove to you what I say. The king consented and followed the sannyasi out of his own territory and passed through many other countries until a, they came to a great kingdom. In the capital of the kingdom, a great ceremony was going on. The king and sannyasi heard the noise of drum and music and heard also the criers. The people were assembled in the street in gala dress, and a great proclamation was being made. The king and the sannyasi stood there to see what was going on. The crier was proclaiming loudly that the princess, daughter of the king of that country, was about to choose a husband from among those assembled before her. It was an old custom in India for princes to choose husband in this way. Each princess had certain ideas of sort of man she wanted for a husband. Some would have a handsome man, others would have only learned, others gained the richest, and so on. All all the princes of the neighborhood put on their bravest attire and presented themselves before her. Sometimes they too they too had their own criers to enumerate their advantages and the reasons why they hoped the princesses would choose them. The princess was taken round on a throne. in this most splendid array and look at and heard about them. If she was not pleased with what she saw and heard, she said to her barriers, "Move on," and no more notice was taken care of the rejected suitors. If however the princess was pleased with any one of them, she threw a garland of the flowers over him and became her husband. The princess of the country to which our king and the sannyasi had come to having one of these interesting ceremonies. She was the most beautiful princess in the world, and the husband of the princess would be ruler of the kingdom after her father's death. The idea of princess was to marry the handsomest man, but she could not to find the right one who pleased her. Several times these meetings had taken place, but the princess could not select a husband. This meeting was the most splendid of all. More people than ever had come it. The princess came it on the throne, and the barriers carried her from place to place. She did not seem to care for anyone, and everyone became disappointed at this meeting. Also was going to be failure. Just then came a young man, a sannyasi handsome as if the sun had come down to the earth, and stood in one corner of the assembly, watching what was going on. The princess came near him, and as soon as she saw the beautiful sannyasi, she stopped and threw the garland over him. The young sannyasi seized the garland and threw it off, exclaiming, "What nonsense is this? I am a sannyasi. What is marriage to me?" The king of that country thought that perhaps this man was poor and so dared not marry the princess, and said to him, "With my daughter goes half my kingdom now, and the whole kingdom after my death," and put the garland again on the sannyasi. The young man threw it off once more, saying, "Nonsense, I do not want to marry," and walked quickly away from the assembly. Now the princess had fallen so much in love with this young man that she said, "I must marry this man and I shall die," and she went after him to bring him back. Then our other sannyasi, who had brought the king there, said to him, "King, let us follow this pair." So they walked after them, but at a good distance behind. The young sannyasi who had refused to marry the princess walked out into the country for several miles. When he came to a forest and entered into it. The princess followed him, and the other two followed them. Now this young sannyasi was well acquainted with that forest and knew all the intricate path in it. He suddenly passed into one of these and disappeared, and the princess could not discover him. After trying to after trying for a long time to find him, she sat down under a tree and began to weep, for she did not know the way out. The Then our king and the other sannyasi came up to her and said, "Do not weep, we will show you the way out of this forest, but it is too dark for us to find it now. Here is a big tree. Let us rest under it, and in the morning we will go early and show you the road." Now a little bird and his wife and their three little ones lived on that tree in a nest. These little birds looked down and saw the three people under the tree, and said to his wife, "My dear, what shall we do? Here are some guests in the house, and it is the winter, and we have no fire." So he flew away and got a bit of burning firewood in his beak and dropped it before the guest, to which they added fuel and made a blazing fire. But the little bird was not satisfied. He said again to his wife, "My dear, what shall we do? There is nothing to give these peoples to eat, and they are hungry. We are householders. It is our duty to feed anyone who comes to the house. I must do what I can. I will give." my body. So he plugged into the midst of the fire and perished. The guests saw him and falling and tried to save him, but he was too weak for them. The little bird's wife saw what her husband did, and she said, "Here are three persons, and only one of little birds of them are to eat. It is not enough. It is my duty as a wife not to let my husband's effort to go in vain. Let them have my body also." Then she fell into the fire and was burnt to the death. Then the three baby, when they saw what was done and that there was still not enough food for three guests, said, "Our parents have done what they could, and still is not enough. It is our duty to carry on the work of our parents. Let our bodies go too." And they all dashed down into the fire also, amazed what they saw. The three people could not of course eat these birds. They passed the night without food, and in the morning the king and the sannyasi saw the princess the way, and she went back to her father. Then the sannyasi said, "The king, you have seen that each is the great in his own place. If you want to live in the world, live like those birds, ready at any moment of sacrifice yourself for others. If you want to renounce the world, be like that young man to whom the most beautiful women and a kingdom where nothing. If you want to be a householder, hold your life as sacrifice for the welfare of others. And if you choose the life of renunciation, do not even look at the beauty and money and power. Each is great in his own place, but the duty of one is not the duty of the other." That's all. We will meet in the next chapter. Thank you.